All right, 7th graders, today we're going to talk about fractions. There's two types of fractions. One is a fraction where it is the part out of the total amount. And so that would be like when you're finding your score. Let's say that on an assignment you got 20 correct out of 22 total problems. That's written as a fraction. And that gives you then, you can find the probability with that fraction. Probability is used to predict something, right? We learned about probability earlier. The number of chances you have out of the what? Probability is the number of chances out of the, Raiden?
The total?
Out of the total, yep. So if you're finding probability, find the number of chances out of the total. Or you can find the percent. How do you find the percent with the fraction? Pete?
By dividing it.
Yeah.
And timesing it out by 100.
Timesing it by 100. So you divide the top number by the bottom number and times it by 100. Right. Now, there's also another type of fraction, and that is called a ratio. A ratio isn't the amount of parts out of the total, or the number of points out of your total score. It's comparing two different amounts. Like miles per hour. The number of miles you can go, or how fast you are going in 1 hour. It's called a rate. Or the number of words you can type per minute is a ratio. Okay? The number of girls to boys in 7th grade, for example. That's a ratio comparing how many. Ratios can be written as a fraction, or they can be written with the two dots. Equivalent fractions. We also will learn about equivalent fractions. Oh wait, let me go up. This is very important. A fraction cannot have 0 in the denominator. Okay? What's the lowest number it can have?
1.
A 1. Yeah, then if a number is written over 1, then it's a whole number. Okay? It can't have a 0 in the denominator. So 1 is the smallest whole number that you can have in the denominator. Okay?
But how come you can't have a 0?
Well, it's because you can't divide by 0. And fractions also mean division. And so you have to have a number here because you can't divide by 0. Okay? Equivalent. What is equivalent about fractions? If you have two equal fractions, what is an equal fraction? Or equivalent fraction? What does it mean? What is equal about them? Like 3/4 is equal to 6/8. Bennett?
2 things. The one with the bigger numbers, smaller pieces,
Yes.
that's equivalent to 3/4. And also, by simplifying, sorry.
Yes.
That's so smart.
And
Good.
also, can you put 0.00001 for the denominator?
Any number that is not 0 is fine. Yeah.
I mean 1, sorry.
Yeah, so you can have a number, as long as it's not 0. Okay, you can divide by any number except for 0. You can't divide by 0. Okay? Yeah. Yes?
For the ratio, I've used our real class numbers for boys and girls, and it's 11/6. So you have to make it a whole number. How will we rate the whole number?
If it's a ratio, it stays as a top-heavy fraction.
Okay.
Well, ratios always stay as top-heavy fractions. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So that's one thing about ratios also. You always keep the numbers separate because they're not the same. Okay? Now, when you're finding equivalent fractions, to find the equivalent fraction, you can multiply both the top and the bottom by the same number to get an equivalent fraction. Or you can divide both numbers by the same number So 4/5, if you multiply both by 3, you get 12/15. You just change the size of the pieces to make more but smaller. Like my mom used to do when we had like a whole bunch of people. Let's say we were having dessert and we had one piece of pie and there was like 2 pieces of pie left over for the 5 of us that were eating. So she would take those 2 pieces and cut them into smaller pieces. She didn't make more, she just made us smaller. Okay? So then, yeah, we got another piece of pie, but it was just like this big instead of a regular size piece. Okay? So that's what you're doing when you're cutting fractions. When you're making an equivalent fraction, you're not changing the amount, you're just changing the size of the pieces. Okay? They're equivalent because they're the same amount, but just different size pieces. And when you're dividing and you're making the fraction bigger, or sorry, smaller numbers, then you're putting the pieces together to make bigger pieces. So you're working the opposite way. Alright? Now, simplest form. How do you know if a fraction is in simplest form? Well, when either the numerator or the denominator is a prime number, and they're not a multiple or a factor of each other. So 4/7, you know that that's going to be simplest form because 7 is a prime number, and 4 doesn't go into 7. They don't have any common factors. Okay? 37/50 is prime. Is again simplest form. Because 37 is a prime number. So that's one way to tell. 16/25 are either of these prime numbers? No, they're not prime numbers, but they also do not have any common factors that you can factor out. Okay? And so, that is a fraction in simplest form because they don't have any common factors. When you're simplifying fractions, you're taking out the factors or the numbers that are in both numbers. Okay? That's where factoring comes in. What we just did, that's where it's really important to know what factors go into a number. So, for example, 16, you can make 16 with 1 and 16 and 4. Those are the factors, right? And you make 25 with 1, 25, and 5. They don't have any common factors.
For 16, what about 2?
Oh, and 2, yes, 2 and 8. Right. Yep, good. So, when you look at the list of numbers, none of them are the same. If they do have common factors, like this one, let's look at this one at the bottom. If we wrote out the factors and expanded this out, this would be like 2 times 9, right? So the factors are 1 and 18. 2, no, that's it. You're right. So you can make 18 with 3 and 6, and this one with 3 times 9. And you can make, let's see, that won't work either. You have to write the prime factors, I guess, to do this way. So, 3 9 times 2 makes 18,
Oh, yeah.
right? And 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. Or 3 and 9 and then 3 and 3. And the x's are x times x. And this is just times x.
So the most common factor is
Okay?
9x.
So then what you do is cross out the ones that are in common. This is one way to reduce this, is to find the common factors. They both have 9s in them, or 3 and 3. And they both have an x in them. Okay? And so what's left is 2/3 and an x on the top line. So this is to be reduced to 2 times x over 3. Okay?
Interesting.
Yeah. Or if you can, if you could just think of, well, 9 goes into 18, right? And 9 goes into 27. And so I could have written 2 times 9 and 2 times, or and 3 times 9, and then just factor out the 9s. And that's one way to reduce it. Okay? When you're reducing variables, you cross out the ones that are in both, and then multiply by the ones that are left. Okay? What I want you to do for tomorrow is practice this with fractions and do 2 through 42 evens. Okay? In the first section, you're just writing equivalent fractions and putting them in simplest form. And then in the second section, you're putting numbers with variables in simplest form. So crossing out the common factors like this. Page 198, 2 to 42 evens.
Liv thought it was 2 to 42 all.
It's okay, I already gave her this.